Well, hello everyone and welcome. I'm Alison from the Southern Cross Postgraduate Association. Today we've got Beck Brown here. This is the last of the careers masterclass for postgrads. This is like we've done 5. This will be number 5 today. So today's, what are we doing today? Networking and personal brand. So we are recording and I'll post the recording up to our YouTube channel. And that's all from me. We'll hand it over to you, Beck. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you. All right. Well, I might start with a welcome to country. So I acknowledge and pay my deepest respects to the ancestors, elders, and descendants on the lands upon which we meet and study. I am mindful that within and without the buildings, these lands always were and always will be Aboriginal land. So my name's Beck Brown. I am super duper excited to be here with you today. I'll just put my screen on so I should just fix it. Just give me 1 sec, sorry for that. That's better. I am super duper excited to be here with you for the last of our series of workshops. If you, for some reason, are just joining us for this one, which could actually be the case, a couple of years ago, we had students that shared with me how much they really needed networking and personal branding. So we actually ran 2 sessions. And so what I did today was combine with you guys in mind, given that we only have the one session today, I've combined all the best bits from those 2 sessions that we run previously. And just a little bit of housekeeping for you. We, as we've both just mentioned, this is the final, so this is networking and personal branding. We have also done interviews. We have done resumes, cover letters. There is also the first in our series was the top tips for success. So that one could be a really nice one to, and if you have any trouble, just please, well, if you're here, you know how to contact the Postgraduate Association. Reach out to Alison if you have any difficulty accessing any of those recordings. But that first one can be a handy one because I cover the each of the following weeks in our series. So that was the first one that we started with, and I provide like a nice little snapshot. So it can be a way to get things that you will need for your application process and success in a snapshot. So before, as I do, and I've really, as a presenter and a facilitator here in this space, I've noticed that increasingly before I facilitate a session, I try to think about what you will, not what I think about, of course, what I'm going to be presenting and your slides and things, but I also try to think about the realities and the non-kind of how to simplify things for you so that what I share with you remains top of mind and it exists for you in a setting that's outside of a whole bunch of slides, I guess. And one of the things that I was thinking about in terms of networking and this personal branding is, and I was thinking about, some of the things that I'll go through in these slides around networking and building your brand. And one of the things that came out, I reflected, which I'm going to get you to do as we move through the slides, is to reflect on people's brands that you like. And when I was thinking about, what a brand, which is coming up in a minute, and what networking would look like for you, two things came to mind. Networking, essentially, you take the word networking and, and personal branding. If you take those terms out of the equation, networking is about people. And the best advice that I was ever given, and I stand by this, and this has been so useful in my own professional journey, is networking is about helping other people. And I heard a term the other day that I hadn't heard before, but we're in a culture of toxic. I know you've got nothing on your slide. This is kind of like a segue, but in an environment at the moment around toxic individualism. And if you think about helping other people outside of the slides, out of everything, if you focus your professional working life from the perspective of sharing and helping others, you will do really well. Then from the branding perspective, which is the latter part of this workshop, consistency. If you consistently show up if you are consistently who you are and demonstrate those personal traits that are unique to you, and you focus on helping and sharing with others, you're streets ahead. Right. Now for the slides. So, what is networking? Interactions with others that are driven by the desire to gain information, broaden social or professional contacts. Networking words include making contacts, connecting, meet and greets, circulating, and social chats or social catch-ups. It's often, and I would say it's not often, it is just about always who you know. But you don't have to be, who you know needs to be relevant to who you are and what you are trying to achieve in who you're trying to know. And if you're authentic about, knowing who you need to know to get to where you want to be, you will find it will come more naturally. So where does networking occur? Industry events. So those might be, it might be an online webinar. It might be a Christmas party for one of your professional associations. It might be coffee down in the plaza, colleagues attending a party. Oh, there we go. Even a coffee shop. Conferences, industry workshops. It might be a hybrid. It might be a face-to-face. It might be through social media, LinkedIn. The latter part of this workshop is I've come back and brought some more LinkedIn into the discussion. I've kept my top tips around the core things. There's lots of things that are smaller things that are changing in LinkedIn, but I'm looking at from like an early grad perspective or new grad. View of networking as a state of mind rather than a specific event. So that really feeds back into what I was saying before about authenticity, openness, curiosity it's something that's really valued by employers, but being curious about others and their experience, the industries they've worked in, their challenges, and curious about other human beings and what's going on for them can be really helpful for you. Now, before I forget, I heard something really cool, which reminded me of it in this setting here. Now, if you are one of the best places to network is not near the door, all right? So I listened to this really interesting study, And they found that the best place to network was near the bar, near the food, but mainly near the bar if there is a bar. And that could be coffee and tea. And specifically at the end of the food or drink station where people have gotten their food. Because often what happens at a networking event is, and I thought this was just gold, it was something actually that I only heard really recently. And it's so true that at a networking event, people come in and they are, there's a heightened, probably a little bit of cortisol going on, a little bit of stress. They're anxious to find somebody that they know. They're anxious to get into the room. Perhaps they're late. Perhaps they're, nervous who they may or may not see in that room, how they're going to be perceived, what they're wearing, etc., etc. And so hanging near the door is not a great place for networking. People relax after they have been, after they've got a drink, after they've got something to eat. So in the middle to the back of the room around those food and beverage stations. The other really interesting thing that I heard, and again, this reminded me of it, is that the most powerful person you can, you're probably not going to do this, but curious and fun if you wanted to, the most powerful person in the room, the most important person in the room, the host or the CEO or whoever it is, people's feet will be positioned towards. And as that important person moves, they found that people's feet moved. So I thought that was pretty cool as well. Some of the benefits of networking: fresh ideas, raising your own profile, building your confidence. Confidence is a lot of really interesting research, and one of the things that I found most helpful recently when I talk about confidence is reminding people that yes, some people are naturally more confident than others, yet you may not know whether they are confident or they're just good at pretending to be confident. And the jury's out around the fake it till you make it bit. Mostly they still do say fake it till you make it. But then the jury will also say there's also some debate around the faking it, and that so there's some more recent discussion around the faking it of things, and that people will pick up on that faking rather than responding to authenticity and vulnerability. But back to the point of confidence. Confidence is a muscle, and confidence comes by doing things and have experiences that challenge us, and we learn how to become more confident. That can be through failure, through obstacles, through other challenges, or various challenges in our lives, whether they're personal, professional, physical, and so forth. Getting a mentor. So the Bright Futures mentoring program is a program offered through the careers service at Southern Cross University. Mentors are wonderful in terms of finding, and as you become more established in your profession, mid-career, or if you have, retrained and you're sort of using your employability skills and you've done a different degree and you're not going all the way back, you're building on, but you are going into a new profession. I really encourage you to find both formal and or informal mentors, whether they're within your organization, whether they are part of, a broader association, it might be through, accounting, etc. Or it might be, a family member. It might be one of your tutors, one of your lecturers, one of your placement supervisors. But they can provide amazing support and guidance, and just helping you sometimes see things that you can't always see, but also that reassurance, helping you with those various obstacles and challenges, that guidance, that wisdom, all can come, and they can remain a part of someone else in your network. And even your mentor can then refer somebody, if they're mentoring you, they may think to talk about you, just like you offer an opportunity to them because they are mentoring you, but marvelous in terms of networking. Maintain your currency in the industry. What that means is staying up to date on trends, technologies, additional training that needs to be done. What is happening in your profession, labour market, etc. Learn new skills and exposure to ideas beyond your current work. That will give you it will give you a level of, it will give you expertise, and it will actually give you power, which gives you credit, social credit, when you are in work, and sometimes in social settings, that if you do have that expert knowledge, that can, if you're in a conversation with somebody and you're a specialist in a particular area, enormously valuable in terms of your networking. Inform future study or career options, and gain a supportive community. And the great thing now, okay, we do live in a very different world in terms of, the online space. But the positive of that is there are so many supportive community spaces there, whether it's LGBTQI, it might be, you may have a disability, so it might be a community associated with, with autism. It may be a niche around perhaps migrant women in leadership in Australia. Lots and lots of different community opportunities and groups that we have access to. And I found something really interesting the other day in terms of these supportive groups and communities. I was listening to a very highly acclaimed podcaster, and I was listening to her interviewing other people. And what I found really interesting was that, these people that she interviews in her particular space, area of interest, expertise, that they're at a certain level, but regardless, in their careers, what I found really interesting was how this lady referred to these really important friendships that she had gained with these other, experts interested in a particular area. I'll just disclose a little. It was neuroscience, and the space around neuroscience, and really propelling your your future self and the science in that arena, and interviews sporting people and artists and etc. But what I found really interesting was that there was and other academics and so forth, entrepreneurs, etc. What I found really interesting was on a couple of instances, she was, she's chatting to and interviewing these people. And what I found really interesting was that she talked about these deep friendships that she had. And clearly, you heard when she interviewed them how much they really cared for each other. But on one of the occasions, at least, she highlighted that these people in this community, in this online space, had never actually met. And I thought that, that because they were different parts of the world, but there was still a really deep bond in their network. So I thought that was really really interesting. Here's some of the do's and don'ts for networking. Do be genuine, do be prepared, do be clear about who you are, do be clear about what you're asking for, do think about what you can offer. And I think this is a really important point in this individualism, toxicity of individualism at the moment, is this like, well, what can I get from you? And what that does, that approach leaves us really isolated in terms of like me. But it doesn't actually, social connections are, and scientifically, in terms of people's longevity and quality of life, are around those social connections. So we need them to survive, and we also need them to thrive. Don't be pushy or aggressive. And so that hopefully that comes, that's quite obvious. Don't be defensive. Don't burn your bridges. An important one. You just don't know where these people, good or bad, those experiences. It's normal and natural to have experiences that aren't perfect, but just be conscious of, those relationships and how you can leave them in the most harmonious circumstances, knowing that no doubt, your paths will cross again. Don't forget to follow up on promises. So if you say you're going to send something to somebody, so for example, prior to, I thought it was quite interesting, just prior to this this networking session, I hung around in a corridor this morning, and if I come back to thinking about those things, that if I could give you something that doesn't relate to the slides, that that you could remember, that's something that was told to me many years ago, is hang around in corridors. And you don't want to be annoying, but I hung around in a corridor this morning, and I heard some really interesting stuff that related to a conversation that I was having in one of the corridors that I hung around in. And I've promised to send somebody something. So don't forget, like if you say, I'll send you an article on that, or I'll send you this guy's contact details, make sure you always follow up, because otherwise, if you kind of you do you get halfway there. Don't be something that you're not, and that can be really hard, in the world where we're in, where on one hand, where, there's this drive, be your authentic self. And then there's all these images and all this rhetoric and marketing, and we're bombarded with messaging about these kind of polarizing pulls, these tensions around having to, if you don't have this car or makeup or whatever it is you happen to be engaging with on those social platforms, then you're missing out. So the value of being yourself is critical, and being discerning with your wisdom around, how important is, purchasing this or that, and is that really going to contribute to my deeper well-being in terms of what I'm planning to, what I want to achieve in your professional lives. Thinking about networking in this way, be curious. And again, I was listening to something really that really highlighted curiosity, but it actually relates curiosity and openness. So one of the top things that employers say that they want is they want openness, actually curiosity, curious, open. They want a level of extroversion versus introversion. It doesn't mean if you're not extroverted that you won't do well. That's absolutely not true. But you can learn for particular settings how you can develop your, and by, I guess, even just by engaging something like this, will give you some ideas and some tools for extroversion, which I'll come to. They also want conscientiousness. So that would be something like following up and, always responding to emails, just as an example. accept that there will be discomfort. Oh, gosh, there'd be no chocolate industry or alcohol industry or clothing industry if we were all happy not to be uncomfortable. We don't like to be uncomfortable. But if we can, there's a lot of it's true. A lot of rhetoric around getting comfortable with the discomfort, and networking can be really uncomfortable. That's why people drink so much at a Christmas party. Family Christmas. Sometimes it's awkward. Think of networking as your pathway to help you find work. I really like this slide because I like I really like a visual in terms of, solidifying understanding of things. So we've been talking about people, connections, social connections. We're talking about the online space. Planning from a networking perspective can be about mapping out it could potentially, there's lots of ways as you could talk about the planning, but mapping out who you may need to talk to, connect with, engage with as you make continuous steps. So continuously planning of who you may need to be engaging with in order to achieve those goals. So perhaps it's another team, if you're working in an existing team. Perhaps it's people in the, your professional association. Perhaps it's, you've got an auntie or an uncle that's an accountant. So perhaps it's, helpful to have a chat to them as you build and friends and family. Ooh, amazing opportunities. Who else could support you? Your lecturers, your tutors, the SCU careers team. So Susie's team, you will have met Susie in the last workshop. Just really lovely to have her here. She did plan to be here today. But had to go to an appointment. So the SCU careers team, amazing. But simple things like your lecturers, your tutors, your neighbours. So a network is a web of people who are connected through common interests and values. And that common interest and values, if you are showing up as best you can, and it can be really hard, as you are, you will find and as your, I hate the expression best self, but working towards being your best self, because we all know it's hard being our best selves. We're human beings. We fall off and we hop back on again and fall off and hop back on, and 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But the more you can work towards, and if you're not clear about what values are, we talk about it in the first couple of workshop, and that self-awareness is critical, but it's something you need to practice and to keep exploring and to keep coming back to as you make professional business decisions. Networking is people connecting with people and linking resources. And I think that's an interesting term there, because resources can be financial resources, they can be physical resources in terms of stock, they can be resources in terms of, in your team, who's got the best office, computers, etc. And then other resources around that might be, opportunities for learning, training, etc. Who, what, where of networking? I think that, again, I try to think about these things in terms of what what this really looks like, rather than it just be on a slide. I encourage you and I challenge you, wherever you are, at whatever stage you're at. Harder if you're new to Australia, perhaps you're younger, you did an undergraduate degree, and you're not familiar with the environment in terms of terms of organisations. But if you are, mid-career, have some sort of professional experience, whatever stage you're at, it's time. Even if you're going, and I love it if you happen to be listening to me at the beginning of your degree, or if you're in the middle of the degree, or if you're at the end of your degree, I want you to start exploring. I want you to start, even if it's mentally, taking notes of organizations that you think, hey, that's cool. I'd really like to work for them. Hey, and so look at, and you can start to, if you don't yet even know what that means, start to think about brands that you see and that you like to purchase around your hobbies, education. So, and start to think about what it is about those that you like, and then ways that you can engage with those organizations more deeply. So it might be, I mean, I've had plenty of students, well, I say plenty, but proportionally it's rather a lot, international postgraduate students that, really love education and have really enjoyed the university environment. And then they've gone on to work in the international office. Now, obviously, there's not a place for every single postgraduate student, but they haven't just kind of just sat there and gone, oh, that's nice. They have gone to the social events. They've pretty much hung around in corridors. They've got to know, they've perhaps come on board as an ambassador. They've had any opportunity to engage. Perhaps they even just go and talk to the and you can make appointments online if you're not close to the Gold Coast or Lismore or Coffs Harbour. They've got to know those student advisors there, and when you become top of mind, they also get all sorts of opportunities that come through there. I've had countless times in my time at Southern Cross University where someone from another team, whether it's marketing, someone doing a focus group, often marketing, jobs, other networks that I've had in other industries that have come to me and said, do you know anybody studying events at the moment that might want to do this? Do you know anybody that would like to be involved in a paid role for a focus group, et cetera, et cetera? And we're busy, just like the people in the international office, we're busy people, but we think about people that have engaged, that really are trying their hardest to do well in their lives. We're like, oh yeah, Sue, Amal, Christian. And so we'll just put those names forward. And so don't underestimate. And I heard somebody again the other day talking about we've got hot leads, we've got the obvious leads that we may have, but for those warmer leads, warm to cool leads, are ones that we really need to cultivate. Engage in, and I guess the hot lead versus warm lead, I'll contextualize this, is probably more relevant for, because I realize we've got very different cohort here. But if you're mid-career and you're retraining and or you're doing some postgraduate study to build on something that you already have, then you're likely to already have the hot leads. You guys then really need to focus on you've got the hot ones, you probably already got them, they're hot for a reason. It's those warmer ones where there's some, so that massage them and you'll find that they can become a hot lead. You never know. And social connection, the science is there, it's coming out everywhere. You have better physical and mental, emotional and spiritual health with better social connections. And at the moment, with mental health as a pandemic, it's worthwhile to engage in these activities, not just for your career, but just for your well-being. So you can reduce the cortisol and reduce those stress hormones in your body by having warm connections. So I'm sending out my warm. And I heard something, again, I try to practice what I preach.
Attention, please conduct me a test on file. Please disregard all times. Next 2 minutes. Thank you.
We're going to have a fire alarm going in a minute. My apologies. Murphy's Law, isn't it? It won't go for long.
Attention. A fire alarm has been activated in the building. Please wait for further instructions. Attention. A fire alarm has been activated in the building. Please wait for further instructions.
Apologies, everyone. Always something fun happens. Okay, so warm leads. So it's going to share with you another really interesting, it does relate to networking and well-being and professional growth and learning. And it probably, well, it's connecting with others. But when we are operating from fear, those stress hormones, that is cortisol. When we are operating from the goodness of our hearts, and it might sound a bit woo-woo, but it's not. The science is there, the neuroscience is there. Then we are actually producing the love hormone, and that is better for our connection with others and also better for our health. Just back here to a couple of other things on here that I would like to talk about just before I move on. We had a true story. We had a student here 1, 2, 3 years ago in this series of workshops. She was a law student and she was a mature age student. She had had a career previously in some sort of, can't remember exactly, but some sort of government compliance. And she was doing law. She must have been doing, I can't remember exactly what her degree was. But anyway, so I suggest, part of the workshops, we suggested that she contact organisations and ask for opportunities. And she knew exactly the organisations that were aligned with her values. And she did what, this is a really hard thing to do, but she did it, and it was just brilliant. She contacted the people, and she was asking just to do some some voluntary unpaid. And by the end of that conversation, they wanted to take her on in a paid capacity. And I don't know what happened. The last I heard was that she was trying to tell them, no, I just want to do some volunteering. And she was having to kind of backtrack. So careful what you wish for. But she really pushed herself out there. But what she did before all of that was she knew, she'd done her research. She knew where she was best aligned with and who she wanted to work for and what she wanted to be doing. And that can be really hard if you're doing something really broad like an MBA, health leadership or something like that. But I encourage you, whatever stage you're at, start now. Information interviews, that is where you can, it doesn't have to be like a formal thing where you go through an interview. That could be with like a family member, like maybe you're thinking about starting some sort of micro business, alongside, you might want to start it now, like while you're alongside your study, just to make a little bit of extra cash, and then talking to somebody who's already successful in that arena. Conduct research, volunteering. Oh, and our last one here, volunteering. I cannot express to you enough how wonderful and helpful for you personally and professionally volunteering will be. It'll, you'll get the love, help your well-being, get to often have fun, make new friendships, gain new skills, build your network, and also it gives you, like, even if you do one Saturday a week for 3 or 4 months, that could be like a quarter quarter of one of your pages, which is quite a lot, I'd say of a two-page resume, that you can, and particularly if you're trying to make that transition into a new profession, that's the way to go. And here's the thing, this looks like a complicated, it looks like a complicated, visual, but it's a really important one. And I've been using it for years because, in fact, nothing has changed from this perspective. So this is a real ding-a-ling-a-ling-a-ling, I'd have to say. But it can be so hard because we're wired for fear, all right? So when we look for a job or voluntary opportunity or a mentor or whatever it is, we go like from the comfort of our home and we scroll through stuff, whether it's LinkedIn, whether it's Seek, etc. But so while you're looking out here, there's an employer or somebody who needs some voluntary experience, and they're looking this way, all right? They're looking internally. And so if you think about it like that, never the twain shall meet, all right? But if you look through the people you know, through your existing organization, through those, your parents, your grandparents, your neighbor, if you look through those connections, word of mouth, people at the uni, people through the various association, people on your placement, hello, you're gonna meet. Yeah. So but what happens is that most people start looking at the top here, they're looking at websites, then they might go to a recruitment agency, then they might go to an association, then they might start desperately asking everyone they know, and then they might go to the organization where they're working and etc. But hang on. Yeah. But employers actually, they start looking this way. They look through their internal promotions. They look through contacts. So they holler up and down the hall, who knows somebody that can do this? Other networking, so friends of friends through the association and so forth. It's not an exact science in it. Sometimes depending on the nature of the role, depending on the complexity, the type of the organization, yes, they do have to advertise it. But sometimes even when they advertise it, they've already got an internal candidate in mind. Sad but true. But the truth is that now you know this, you keep working to be that person that is seen internally. Benefits of networking. So learn, I think we've touched on some of this, learn about your industry, learn about developing new skills, get feedback. Ooh, ouch, hurts. Know where your resources are, meet new people, some of whom part of your inner circle. It's a chance to help others. I can't express that enough. But it can be beneficial. It can strengthen against, yes, and this is so what can happen particularly and increasingly in the environment that we're in. I was just driving along this morning listening to, they're about to make employees of, so last week, a couple of weeks ago, it was Telstra, that they were, lots and lots of staff were losing their jobs. This week it's the CSIRO, the CSIRO. They're going to be losing corporate staff and people in their research teams. These are big organizations. And so when you have a network, an underbelly of people, it can help shield you. There's a phrase, a recent phrase called career cushioning, and we should all be career cushioning. As soon as you're in the workforce, I would be always having an eye, two eyes, around to make sure that if this happens, you've got a we all need a contingency plan for just about everything in the world that we're in, a backup plan. So you may get your dream job, and this is not for fear mongering, more just, you know, they're unusual times, but having a backup. And also those unexpected things where you are made redundant, unexpectedly lose your job, devastating when that happens. When you get on the other side of that, there is pure gold if you can navigate that pathway. And all really successful people, when you hear their stories, they've all faced, you know, just about any human being all human beings. I mean, do people have different, you know, there's bad luck and there's, you know, there's genetics and all sorts of, you know, and then there's where you're born and all other sorts of things play into it. But when you hear the stories of really successful people, they have experienced adversity and they have then taken what they have learned and then they've applied that to the next, I guess, challenge, next goal that they're trying to achieve. Can generate options otherwise. Yeah, so giving you options and gifts, other benefits. It helps you find a mentor, create career champions, and generate job leads. Here are the 10 tips to networking whilst at university. So don't underestimate, even if you are, you know, you might think, well, I'm a postgraduate student, I'm and perfectly valid postgraduate student. I'm working, you know, full time, caring for my family. You know, got aging parents. You know, helping out with the kids' sport. How does this apply to me? Truth, just if you're in a huge class, you know, an online class, an evening class, and there's 60, 80 other students, you can still make yourself known in that classroom. You might be the only person that puts your camera on. That can be a bit confronting if there's 70 other people and you only want the camera on, but you can be the one that has a chat. You can be the one that asks additional questions. You're the one that can put a little emoji in there, show that engagement. And you know what? If somebody then comes and says, you know, that's it's a subject, you know, leadership in health, can you recommend, you know, an online student for a focus group? And there's 60 students in there, and that's just blank faces from your tutor's perspective. They're just, you know, just names on the thing. But you remember Claire or Suzanne or Stephen or David or Kamal or whoever it is, kitching, off you go. So these things don't have to be, yes, there are advantages by being, you know, located, by having, you know, a scholarship or having additional funds or financial support, you know, to be able to, you know, undertake some of these things. However, there are small ways and steps that you can take. And that can be about, so I have three young men who are now moving into their late 30s, 3 postgraduate Indian men that all came to Australia. I don't know if they were all friends beforehand. I call them my 3 amigos. 3 very different students. But they actually, all of them, in their own way, did all of these things. They didn't all do it at the same time in the same way, but they got their LinkedIn going. They definitely used the careers team countless times. That's something they all did. They all got part-time jobs in Australia. They all got involved in and again, in varying degrees, mentoring opportunities, etc. One of them set up a club. And so where these three gentlemen are now at, and three very different people, different personalities, different backgrounds. Just happens that they were all, I said, at least two of them were friends beforehand. But anyway, very different, exquisite human beings. And what I learned so much from them. And one of them, anyway, so the end of the story is that all three of them got their residency. One is in a very senior role, and not to disclose who they are, senior role in on the Gold Coast in a government organisation, working with students and wellbeing. Brilliant. One is now the acting general manager of a hotel down in Tasmania, and he's, for as long as I've known him, he's been talking about getting involved in technology and tourism. And he just sent me a message the other day to say, I'm finally doing it. I'm about to push the boat out for my business. The other one is gone back to work in universities in recruitment as well. They did have professional, they had a few years of work experience because it was postgrad before they came to Australia. But what I know about each of them from a networking, personal branding perspective, they have remained absolutely true to their vision of being here in Australia and finding a home here, building a life here and having a career here and having a good life. They have stuck true to their own individual values and different interests. They have remained professional, and they've done all of these things, the top tips in their own way. And they have been consistent, and they've had a plan. All three of them had a plan, and they had a vision. And there is a lot more science, which is super duper exciting for me, about the science of manifestation, visualization. It's something I've been interested in for a very long time, and it's really exciting to see that intersect between science. And they had, all three of them had a plan, which they prepared probably before they came, or no doubt before they came to Australia. And what they've done a great job of doing is, I still mentor the three of them, but in a separate pro bono scenario, after several, more than several, 5 or 6 years of them off doing their own thing. But they're just great at asking for information, advice, feedback, assistance. And they don't ask, they're not asking for a job. They're just asking, and they're asking other experts. And I was listening to this podcast just last night about this guy that had multiple careers and now has developed a career as an artist. And he talked about, I asked all the top people I could find, asked them, I was like, wow, this isn't new stuff. It's just following a formula. And another lady who then, I was telling some students today, went on to play Tina Turner. She found out she emulated and had a fan crush on Tina Turner. Went on to, and she followed Tina Turner's plan for success. So she studied, as a case study, she used Tina Turner. Super cool. But what you need to know is that 80% of jobs they're below the surface, and never, ever has this been more true. And what I've found in the last couple of years is, this has always been the case, is that, if you happen to be in the room at the time, you're so currency and hanging around, because people are busy, particularly for casual, part-time, non-full-time contracted work. Being Johnny on the spot will work brilliantly for you, and more work than you can poke a stick at. But this has never been more true, is that there is an absolute abundance. Yeah, it's not a perfect full-time job with you know, $200,000 a year with benefits and a house and a car, etc. But there is plenty of meaningful, well-paid work that sits below the surface. You can't, it takes time to find this work because you kind of got to do all the other stuff to get to this place where you can find this work. But the more you do that other stuff, the more these exciting opportunities pop out. So how do we network? Keep authentic, successful, be genuine, be consistent, be patient, step outside of your comfort zone. Oh, awkward. This is great. Create a, and sometimes, you know, when I think about this create a name, a list of 100 people, I remember thinking about, you know, a guy who was an engineer, a friend of a friend, and he got made redundant from his work. And sometimes unexpected, like I was saying before, unexpected things can happen. But what I noticed that he did, you know, I heard informally through the grapevine that, you know, he was struggling and looking for work. And then, but he then like narrowed it, and then he just started reaching out to, you know, to everyone that he knew and telling people what, and ideally you hope that it doesn't get to that place where there's kind of that sense of being really desperate. But you would be surprised. I think that the important thing to know with this is how many people you guys actually do, how many people you guys already do know. So, you know, even if you're new to Australia, you know, perhaps people in the international office, other lecturers, tutors, housemates, friends of housemates, landlords, if you've got a part-time job, people in the part-time work, family of the people in the part-time work, other people that you work part-time with, other students. So if you just added up that list, there's more people than you would know. So I'd really like you to think about how you feel about networking. And I would even suggest, you know, if you're listening at home, like writing down, ooh, what makes me really uncomfortable? What lights me up? What sort of situations do I feel okay? What's worrying me about this? Where do I feel like not good enough, or what's coming up for you? Because that is information and it's insight and it's self-awareness that gives you some tools to then take some action on. And then also like acknowledging what you'd like to know more about. And please, you know, if you're listening to this at home and there's things that I haven't talked about in here that you'd like to know more about, that happened. As I said, when I started this workshop here, students, and I've added things to this from feedback from a couple of years ago, that students, like, they told me they wanted more of this stuff. And then, have you found networking to be beneficial? I personally would say, I don't want to tell you my professional story, but what I would say is that 80% of the work that I have done, in more, 90% of the work that I have done in the last nearly 20 years has been through my network. Doesn't mean I haven't applied for jobs and, you know, those sorts of things haven't happened, but the bulk of my work, and even if I've applied for a job, it's been through somebody saying, hey, this is coming up, I'd suggest you apply for it. So that's indicative of how powerful. And I can say that, you know, I'm very fortunate to have literally loved my working life, but that's because of the people that have been a part of that working life through that network, because it gives it purpose and meaning. So, and and try to take out that, think of not that word of networking, just think about, you know, from a perspective of people, learning, growing, curiosity, some of those other words, because I think networking can just scare the living daylights out of you or anyone. I was been thinking, I had this slide in here for a long time, and I've been rethinking this. I think the concept is still the same, but I think it can create some terror. And I'm conscious that, you know, when we're chatting to people about our professional lives, you know, we're nervous enough. And what I heard and was reminded of really recently, when you are building a network, talk less. Oh, hello, Radha. Okay. Hey, welcome. You'll be here for the second hour, which is wonderful because I'm just about to move. So just have a listen to the recording. Just about to move into the second part of personal branding. And what I was just about to say is that something wonderful that I heard, which can be really helpful. So Radhika, I just started to say that I was reminded of something that's so helpful the other day, and a few minutes ago, I've been talking about how the word, and I've talked about it a couple of times in this first hour, the notion of networking, that word is so formal and can be really terrifying. And just think about it as having a chat, but also thinking about it in terms of listening. And when you go to an event, ask if you show people genuine interest in what they're doing, what their experience was, what their day was like, what they're enjoying at the moment, what have you, depending on the nature of the event, and you really listen and you talk less than you talk, talk less and listen more, that in itself will build your personal brand, and it will increase your sense of magnetism as well. So when we have this thing called the elevator pitch, and as I'd started to say, I'm just rethinking about it because we want to avoid like terms or experiences that make us really self-conscious. All I would say, rather than, you know, calling it an elevator pitch, and it's a term that's been around there forever, and the notion is that you're going to go up an elevator and you've got a short period of time to make a connection with someone. But this morning, going up the elevator, there was a moment there where there was 3 of us in the lift, and one person got out, and it was just, I was just in the lift with somebody, one other person, and making a little joke or complimenting them. I like your hair, or I like something about their clothing, and starting a conversation that way, and allowing them to talk can be equally more powerful than, let me tell you all about me and what I'm going to do and what I'm going to, in this kind of, this world of, you know, individualism and let me find out what you can do for me. But in terms, because sometimes you may end up both getting off on the same level, and you can keep that conversation going where you can then ask those other questions. But sometimes you don't have that long, but it can really brighten somebody's day? And do you want to brighten somebody's day? Yes, because if you encounter them another time and you've brightened their day, they will remember you. So we want to balance this idea of, getting across the tell me about yourself and who I am, and, having a spiel about, where you're going next and all that sense. You're balancing that with trying to genuinely find out about somebody and finding common ground for a connection. So the student shared with me, she didn't know that I was, teaching there. And she shared with me, what did she say? Oh, she said, it was week 6. And so she said, going back to, so it's week 6 for, I don't know about for where you guys are up to. Oh, yeah, postgrad, you're on the 6-week model as well. So, and she said, it's week 6, and she goes, I can go back to retirement. And then we just had this moment of being able to laugh and relax and have some camaraderie around it being a certain time in the calendar in the semester. And it was fleeting, but there's that sense of connection. So you can use this idea of providing an overview of your study and your experience and your goal, yes, but sometimes in 30 seconds to just get your idea across is too kind of like, it's a bit intense, really. But being ready for this, tell me about who you are, which may come up after a little bit of, you jump online together, and then you talk about the weather, and then, that informal discussion that happens before an interview. And then they might say, tell us a little bit about yourself. So then being prepared. But there's a lot to be said for just those soft touches with people where there's no agenda, where you don't need to get somewhere. You're just genuinely having a chat and having a connection. But here is an example of when you're at that networking event and you've got a potential employer, and, it probably wouldn't go exactly like this, but my name's da-da-da. And then you'd say, I'm studying a bachelor. What I often say, and then I've recently completed, some training. I'm fascinated. So I'm fascinated by these things, and also chucking in some grades there. It might look a little bit obvious, but with that word of fascination, what I found really helpful in an interview situation or in a networking position, refer in those first few minutes when you're talking about what you're in and where you're talking about what you're loving, what you're being, isn't it exciting, the use of AI and blah, 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 blah. But think about something you're really genuinely excited or curious about, because that really stands out. And you can use that as a tool in your interview. Talk about what you're loving, even in that informal, like, in those informal first couple of minutes. What was in the weather, in my corridor chat this morning, we talked about how beautiful the view is from the Gold Coast and how the whales come in there. And how lucky staff and students are to, if you do get to the Gold Coast campus, or go down there and hang around in some corridors, go and meet your tutors and your lecturers, but go upstairs high as you can and look for the dolphins, whales. Personal branding is the second. It goes along with, of course, your networking. And for context, where I begun this session was I talked about consistency. And consistency could not be more important. As I said to you, I reflect before I come and deliver each of these workshops, and it's something I've really more consciously got into the habit of doing as I move through, you know, the time being here with students in different capacities. And I think about, as I shared with you, how I can bring this stuff to light so it's not just, you know, me a talking head. And consistency, that's consistency in how you dress, how you talk, your level of, you know, your level of positivity, your approach, your vision, your mission. So a way to think about this is to think about somebody like, who do we all know on the planet? Taylor Swift. Most people know a little bit about Taylor Swift, and what we know about Taylor Swift is that she is true to herself. She is not afraid to speak up for causes and to speak up for things that matter to her as a woman in a time, in an industry that doesn't always necessarily, you know, is not necessarily always supportive of, you know, women in particular situations. So she is always true to herself. So if you think about, it's not necessarily, and I won't put whether I like it or don't like them, but if you think about Harry and Meghan, you know, so we think about brands, and initially when they were doing really well, when they first started, you know, in the monarchy, they had a very clear personal brand. They were fortunate though at those times. They you know, how they showed up in settings and what they, and I put in inverted commas, what they stood for, because of course, you know, things come to light about, you know, how things were behind the scenes, and it's not necessarily a discussion about that, but a discussion really about branding. And I read a really interesting article about Harry and Meghan, just, I think it was just a couple of days ago, about their personal brand. And in fact, and I also watched a, you know, just a short commentary, and everybody's got an opinion about them. But I think most would agree that, or most commentators, and depending on which side you sit on the fence, is that their brand was damaged by what some would argue, and again, it's not a debate on ethics or whatever on their behaviour. We just talk about it purely from a non-judgmental perspective around, you know, brand. It is argued that they damaged their brand by, you know, the book and the Oprah Winfrey and etc. But we come back to the branding. The commentary now is very clear that they've lost. Oh, lovely to have you guys here for the hello. Great, you've got another, and then we can have a chat. So that'll be beautiful. Be able to chat to you guys about what brought you here. So beautiful. I'll just wrap up. So we're just talking about personal branding, and I was just talking about Harry and Meghan. And one of the current rhetoric is the damage to their brand. But one of the important things that has been reflected on in both a TV commentary that I was listening to, and also some written commentary, and I agree from a, you know, broader perspective, is that they have lost their way in terms of consistency about who they are, what they represent, what they stand for, what their values are, and some of that really simple stuff. So, for example, in the commentary, it reflected on things like, for example, with the Duchess starting a website, but a new company, I don't know, something to do with jam. And obviously there's more to come. but they commented on kind of unfinished, to launch something, but it's half launched. There's apparently some VIPs got some jam, and there's a flash website, but nothing else is happening there. And then the commentary went on to talk about a series of other actions that their livelihood entirely now, living apart from the royal family, their entire livelihood relies on, different to, us mere mortals, our personal brands, yes, are absolutely connected to the work that we do, but it may not be whether we make, millions and millions of dollars today or tomorrow. Whereas for them, they are a brand. They exist on their brand and their success, and so I guess they're like us on speed, on crack cocaine, in terms of like where we're at and where they're at. But the thing that is about trust. So who is your audience? And many would say that, the global population for them, sadly, when they are in the public eye, that's their audience. And so what has happened, unfortunately, is that they have lost. So this would be the same if you're a politician, if you're going to start your own small business, if you're going to be a general manager, whatever leadership and sphere of influence you're going to have, if your people no longer trust you and trust who you are, then that damages your personal brand. And I think anybody could safely say that the trust amongst the public, and then all those that would invest in them, like Spotify, Netflix, etc., if you erode those relationships and trust, whether you're Meghan Markle or the CEO of Optus, once you lose the trust, and I use CEO of Optus in that, CEO, you have a CEO and they have the organization has a brand, has customers. And if you don't, there was a data breach, and if you lose that trust of your customers, constituents, whoever they are, then that is your demise. So the process of personal branding involves finding your uniqueness, building a reputation on the things you want to be known for, and then allowing yourself to be known for that. And that's where it's become quite tricky. And it was interesting with this commentary around the Duke and the Duchess, is that it's kind of gone all over the place, because they've got access to some of the best marketing and branding teams on the planet, but they've also churned through lots of different people, or so the commentary says, and I believe the commentary that I had. And so somebody has told them to go this way, and then someone else has obviously told them to go that way, and then go back to their roots, and that gets lost, and so there's that lack of consistency. And so one of the first things that I said when I came to this class for you guys, one of the things that I thought when I thought about coming to you is being consistent. And that could be simple things. So, for example, just here, just turned it off. Just here, in every session that I do, for familiarity, for comfort, for ease, is that I always start with, always have the visual, the same background. Because again, we're wired for familiarity and safety. And I want, people to go, oh, here we go, just as one small example of branding and personal brandings. So we've got to come to a point where what does the and I'll ask you, Radhika, what does the term, or anything you'd like to share in here, what does the term personal brand mean to you, or anything that's come up that's brought you to come along here around your questions of personal branding and networking?
within my various communities or organizations.
Oh, sorry. Can you just turn your mic up a little bit, please?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. So, yeah, I was saying that I think the personal brand for me is how I'm viewed within, various communities and organizations, and how I hold myself as well.
And in fact, you just reminded me of something really simple. Thank you so much. I can see it, even in terms of personal branding here, you've got your picture there on, and that's something simple that you can do. So here's a few really simple, things, particularly early career. And thank you. You said something about meetings there. On your email, as soon as you get into that company, there's an option to put your photo there. So pop your photo into your email. Put a little, put your signature in there, even if you don't have to. Put a signature in there with the organization's logo, etc. Forms part of, as you start to form part of your brand. Also, use the photo that you have on your LinkedIn. Use that same photo for everything. So put that into, if you've got to communicate in Microsoft Teams, LinkedIn, any other platforms where you have to put any other work platforms, use the same photo, particularly if you're working remotely, because that builds consistency and it builds that sense of recognition and that safety of like, oh yeah, and it's that reminder of who they're dealing with, particularly in a remote world. Some other things that, again, thank you so much that you reminded me of, again, small things. When you, and this can be so hard, I know nobody wants to turn their cameras on. There's nothing to do with you guys in a meeting. Please, 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 if you're in a staff meeting and you have the option, so you've got a team staff meeting, you're all working remotely or you're in hybrid roles, and there's an option to turn your camera on, which 99% of the time there is, unless it's been deactivated, put your camera on. If you want to raise your personal profile and build your brand, same within a class, like with your tutors and your lecturers, you put your camera on, oh, life-changing. And literally something as small as that. Also, if it's, so putting a camera on, keeping that consistent. Also, in a staff meeting, wherever you can, in terms of your brand and meetings, thank you again for that reminder, with building your brand. The wonderful young man that I had the good fortune of meeting, he was originally an international student, did postgraduate study in tourism hospitality, and originally from China, and got into tourism and hospitality education. And I watched this young man do an amazing, we look at branding and meetings. So thank you again because there's gold in this. That's why I love having you guys here. What I noticed that he did brilliantly in meetings is that when people go to a staff meeting, which you will all no doubt have to go to, there's a tendency for people to speak too much or too little. And what I observed about him is that he had a brilliant capacity to speak, not to be seen, but speak to contribute or to ask questions or to be curious, as a way of raising his profile authentically, rather than speaking to be heard through his fear or ego or power. He spoke to learn and to be curious And that became part of his brand and a powerhouse. And that's a very genuine, it was a few years ago, and it really struck me because that's personal branding in action. And when people go to a staff meeting or a training, a seminar, a reimagining, revisioning, trying to achieve organizational objectives, a team building event, what have you, most people, even the extroverts, are anxious to some extent because there's a sense of people being judged. So think about your contribution, think about contributing, which again comes back to the beginning of this workshop, and sharing, rather than trying to just add stuff to be seen, because people will see through that sense of you just trying to add stuff to be seen. And people are quite, intuitive enough to know, to kind of see, egotistical behavior, and it's not authentic. And so on the other hand, what is commonly done is you'll find that, as it said earlier, people will speak too much or they'll speak too little. And saying nothing at all can be probably as equally, I would say, harmful as saying, harmful is a wrong word, saying too much. There is a middle ground, and in Buddhism we call it equanimity. And that is that middle ground. And there's a lot to be said for a middle place. And if you take that middle place into your interview, that can be really helpful too, because that's an opportunity to network. You may not get the job, but they may refer you, they might get back to you and suggest you, or they may come back in a couple of months' time. It's an opportunity to make an impression. So finding commonality between you and who's interviewing you, and finding that common ground can be really helpful in terms of future opportunities. But that middle place, because I want to share that with you for the beautiful students that we've got here and have had here live over the last few weeks, is that many of our students are international students, so there can be a sense of I guess language and cultural things. But I want to remind you how amazing you already are to have achieved what you have achieved. And I say that from the fullness of my heart, because it is not easy to achieve. And what I see students do when they go into these networking opportunities, preparing for an interview, putting themselves forward, is that those mental barriers that students can have around their level of, whether it's their vocabulary or their clarity of expression or their cultural understanding or their gender, we carry that into those networking and, or performance appraisals or staff meetings or interviews. We carry that own bias of ourselves, and that gets in the way of us. It's like you dob on yourself before you even get in there, and they are not looking to judge your English language. It can become a component of, but they're not sitting there assessing you on your English. They're assessing you when you get to the interview. Of course, yes, they're looking at your oral communication skills, no doubt. However, if you pronounce a word, you stumble on a word, that's not the be all and end all. If you stumble on a word and you still make a connection and you show your warmth and that there's someone that they would like to have on your team, they will employ you over, and you show your enthusiasm, whether it's in a networking event, whether it's in an email, for a voluntary position and you show that enthusiasm, and there's you've got a short period of time to get a great opportunity to, I don't know, to sit on to do a focus group where you're paid, and if you show that enthusiasm and try to make a connection that will work above you in terms of if there's a typo or if you don't get a word right, or if you think you look different to how they may perceive you, because they're not coming in, they're coming in with a blank slate. And what I see is I see it with corporates, I see it with women, I see it people that are too young, too old, disability, not disability, wrong color. We all have our own fears around who we are when we show up. And I see that we block ourselves before they block us. And so that I want to raise that as part of your branding, but also as part of building those connections, about making a connection with others. So here's just a few other tips for you. This idea of like working towards our passions, I'm super duper, you probably heard me refer to the science around some of this stuff, but I'm super duper, people probably get bored of me talking about the science, but I'm super excited. Like, speaking of passion, my passion is the intersect between things like well-being, branding, authenticity, work well-being, designing our lives, and the literature and the science around how we live really wholesome but healthy and fulfilling working lives, and at that intersect. And never so it's been tossed around forever, this idea of, oh, work a day, do what you love and you'll never work, you never work a day. There's a phrase, do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. And then people say, oh, well, if you go and work in your passion, you'll get burnt out. Yeah, there's some of that is true as well, but there is so much evidence around working when we're fulfilling our careers to move in the direction, continue. This is a ding-a-ling-a-ling, and I hope this comes off the slides for you, is move in the direction for what lights you up. If it lights you up and you feel engaged, energized, enthusiastic, excited, there's gold there for you. If you feel exhausted, anxious, there's some information there. So when you are preparing your own personal brand and you're preparing your future around, you might be studying business, or you might be studying HR, or you might be studying finance, or you might be studying health. But under each of those, there is a billion different pathways. And if you can keep looking for and exploring the pathways under accounting, so it might be accounting in hospitality, it might be corporate accounting, it might be political accounting, it might be tax accounting. If it's law, it might be corporate law, it might be community law, it might be women's law, it might be immigration law. So, and yet, in the stage that many of you will be at, if you're in the midway through your master's degree, you won't know yet, but look for every time you do an assignment that brings you joy, or a part-time job that's brought you great joy, or your hobbies and how you can align, your interest in mountain biking with tourism business and starting some sort of, mountain biking tour business, as an example, some sort of micro business. Perhaps it's just taking children in the community on a local mountain biking trail, something like that. I mean, it's not a great example, just one off the top of the head. So grow your social footprint, but grow it cautiously, and Google yourself. that's always helpful to do. But grow your social footprint cautiously. Be cautious about what you comment on, what you say. What happens is things that are said in a social is it's harder to erase than it is to say it. But the other thing too is that if you're on LinkedIn and you refer to, even if it's something you feel really passionate about, but there's a lot of darkness, and I say darkness in the sense surrounding that, maybe it's around violence or vulnerable people in our communities. Just be really cautious about what you say. And it's not to say, I'm not at all telling you to, tone your voice, to go against anything that feels really important to you, but just be really cautious about where you, with your audience, spend some time watching what others do and how they present this, and then spending some time and looking at how, if somebody does feel really strongly about particular causes, whether it's domestic violence or whatever it is, immigration policy, just watch how others that you admire communicate in that space that maximizes the opportunity to create a difference in that space. Because if you feel really deeply about social justice issues, which we need on the planet, be cautious about how you communicate that and who you communicate it with, for the maximum impact and for your future. And tell a story. Telling stories, we know that people love stories. Just some quick things about LinkedIn. I did a bit on LinkedIn a couple of workshops ago. Be yourself. If you're new to LinkedIn, what I would say is, I always have a bit of a giggle, is that I'm, myself and my colleagues, I say colleagues, people in my LinkedIn circle, we're in career development, career work. And as a percentage of my contacts, I would say 60 or so, maybe more, 70% of those contacts are professionals in the career space. And then of those 70% of people, less than 5% of them, even though we're in the profession, actually post. So I want to highlight that to you, because don't get caught up in the terrifying world that this idea that you've got to be on LinkedIn and you've got to be commenting on everything and you've got to be hashtagging everything and you've got to be posting, and it's absolute rubbish. So what you do need to do is have a profile there. You do need to have a photo, and I'm going to highlight things that I would suggest. But if you're early mid-career, as long as your profile is neat and tidy and professional, I'll talk about the things in there, you don't have to do anything. Most people don't do anything. If I then look at, I take that 70%, if I go to the 100% of people, it's still 5 or at a push 10%. So that's, I think I've got about maybe 600 contacts on there. 60 people of the 600 people ever post anything. And then it's probably like a few percent of that percent that post all the time. So I share that with you to take the stress out of it. You do need to be seen on there. Employers will look, but they're not going, they are still, I had a situation recently in a different context where I had to look at people's LinkedIn as part of a unit, and many of the probably half of the people in that particular situation, half of them already had pretty good part-time jobs. Some of them had professional jobs, but most of them had really decent part-time jobs, and their LinkedIns were like a credit, if that, maybe a pass, if I were, in the situation I was reviewing them. So the reason I share that with you is that if you just follow some simple suggestions, it will be fine. So be yourself, be responsive. So if people write to you, they DM you on there, right back. Personalize. If you reach out to connections, add a little blurb. That always works really nicely. Avoid mass messaging, definitely. Research someone before you reach out, so be prepared for what you're going to say. Ensure your profile is professional and proofread. And importantly, really, really importantly, is your summary. Make sure that you put that through, particularly for your grammar. That's an area, and it's not just international students, that is for domestic students, because it doesn't go through Word, and I see lots and lots and lots and lots of typos in there. Always say thank you when a connection has helped you. Keep your reputation intact, and that means just being really mindful about, you know, what you do on there. Yeah, so lots of people have the LinkedIn. It can be really helpful to put the app on your phone. A bit of a, you know, like at night, and it becomes another thing you scroll on as you move through your career. So decide whether you want that, because you get the notifications. Decide whether you want that level of intrusion in your life or not. Make sure you've got your photo there, head and shoulders, smiling, clear background, and then you want to have an extra background for the other bit, but head and shoulders shot. No dogs, no sides of walls, no partners, no half face of partners. Try not to have too many trees and distractions in this first background. If you're going to have another background, make sure they fit, you know, that they complement one another. Create a distinctive headline. This is really important. You can tweak your headline. When we talk about consistency, you can continuously refine your brand, but I'd encourage you not to do, you know, what the the Sussexes are doing, Harry and Meghan, is it's all over the place in terms of, you know, we're in Nigeria with this, but we're a business person, but we're also a Spotify. That can work really well for some people that have got the trust of the population. They can be have a goop business and be an actor and, you know, run a clothing business or whatever. But when you haven't developed yourself in a stable context with trust in a particular setting, if you're all over the place, it can be really hard to develop that trust. But what I would say, this is an absolute ding-a-ling-a-ling. Make sure that your title is specific as you can. So there's an option so you're going to do a master's, you know, you're going to be a postgraduate student, but note what profession you're in: health leadership, corporate law, accounting, business, tax accounting. That can be really helpful. And it also helps you like own, even if you're not yet in tax accounting, they say with branding and with success is that you live it and breathe it, even if before you act as if, before you're in that space. So if you're aiming and you're going to get a job in tax accounting, put yourself as tax accounting. Connect with trusted individuals. Perception is important. Be consistent. Help others, help others, help others. So here are a few things. Have a profile photo, make it personal. Always add a summary. Add your contact details. There's a little link there that you can add. Just add an email address. I wouldn't put your phone number in there because cyber risk has just become a thing and you will actually have to verify your account now with LinkedIn, which is new. So there's a bit of if you are setting it up, there's a 2 or 3 step verification process. So if you say that you work at that you're studying at Southern Cross University, it will send an email address, an email verification to Southern Cross. And I think that's fair because of it's annoying to have that verification process, but it is because of stealing people's identities, etc. Experience. If you listen to our resume workshop, do your resume and do all of the sections we suggest, and then cut and paste all those details in there. Do add skills, follow hashtags, connect and follow individuals or groups. So that might be other universities you might want to attend, the SCU alumni, other associations to do with your profession. So APRA, if you're in, health, other leadership groups, other, if you're interested in positive psychology, it might be, and you want to go back, you want to do positive psychology in Europe, and look at what they're doing in that space in Europe, as an example. Post and publish. You don't have to do this yet. Ideally, you work towards getting recommendations. A recommendation is like a reference. So you could ask like one of your tutors, one of your lecturers, somebody that you've worked with in a different capacity to write a little blurb about you, referring you. Many, I don't spend a lot of time talking about it. It's great to have recommendations, but even, of those 60-70% of the career professionals in my field, I'd say less than half of them even have recommendations. But it does give you a bona fide, it does give you kudos in that somebody has publicly said, I acknowledge these person's skills, etc., and their experience, their work experience. Personalize, don't send a request without a message. Here are other things. Add sufficient keywords. So keywords are really important for your profession. Do endorse others for skills that they have. Make sure that you keep working on your about section. So again, keywords, your passions. The SCU alumni, try to join that group immediately. There are professionals in there that are super duper happy and willing to help our students. Browse and apply for jobs on LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is commonly posing jobs. What I would say, super duper duper important, I've got it there. Always add a cover letter. I see people all the time, like a job's advertised and 2 minutes later there's 15 applicants. And I think, how could you have tailored your LinkedIn and done a cover letter in those few minutes? Pay attention to who's viewed your profile. What you can do, if somebody interesting's viewed your profile and they haven't asked to connect with you, give it a shot. Send them a connection request. Adjust your settings frequently, so you can turn your privacy settings on or off. With your online presence, just Google yourself, see what comes up, ask questions based on your profile. Check your privacy settings on other things like your Facebook accounts, your Instagram. If you want them to have a look at your Insta, sure, keep it open. But if you've got things on there that, your drinking escapades at a party or something that you may not want to have on there, carefully consider what you post on social media, or I'd say what other people can see, but definitely what you post, but it could be a bit late for some people. And I say that lightheartedly. Consider developing, you can go and delete things from your accounts. Consider developing a stronger positive professional social media presence. Now's the time, and use a professional email. So it's time to, if you've got Yahoo, it's time to lose Yahoo. This is the careers team here. Amazing, amazing, amazing team that can help you. Now, Radhika, can I help you with anything?
No, I think I'm all good. Actually, I found that really helpful. And I do have a few takeaways to go and work on, for example, with my LinkedIn. I think for me, it's just finding the time for the most part.
Yeah, fabulous. And tell me, what's your course? What are you doing?
I studied health science postgrad, and now I've already started working. But I'm looking at sort of where I can take my career.
Nice. And where are you working?
I'm working in Southern Cross, in the as a research assistant.
As a research assistant?
Yes, that's right.
Brilliant. I'm so proud. And how is that going?
It's going good. I'm enjoying it. The job's good. The people are nice.
And you know what? I'm not surprised that you have that job, because you're here. You've showed up, and you showed up. You got your picture here, and you're doing the work. You've set aside, this time to be here, and we've got your beautiful. I'll make it a bit fairer, so we got you back on, so you don't feel like got you entirely on the screen there. But I'm not at all surprised that you're in that role. Oh, fabulous. And so how many hours a week are you doing?
It's full time now.
Oh, and then which campus are you attached to?
Lismore.
How unreal. And is it in an area that you will do your PhD, or you've completed your PhD, or
No, I've done a master's. I'm not looking at a PhD.
say that again?
Sorry. I've done my master's, but I'm not looking at a PhD.
Yet.
Not for, not for a while, I think.
I heard that again tonight. They say yet. You
Yeah,
never know.
I mean, after I've recovered from the master's completely, I think.
Yeah, and it's such a good point. Yeah, and I was just talking to, our professional, I've talked a bit about balance in here, and our professional lives is about knowing when you need to recover and take a rest, and, consolidate and enjoy what you're doing. And then, there's a guy that says slow down to speed up, but also knowing that never say never. We don't have to say never, but also the world would benefit from having your PhD. Just saying. Just saying. And how long are you in that role for?
I only started about 2-3 months ago now, actually.
Fantastic. And is it like a couple of years, a contract for a couple of years?
It's an ongoing contract. Yeah.
Oh, and that must give you peace of mind. It's quite unusual. Well, not quite unusual. Relatively unusual for RA role. Is it RA? Is it research assistant position?
Yeah. Yep, that's right.
Yeah. To have an ongoing tenured full-time position. So congratulations for that. The world of work is moving so far away from, a full-time tenured role. So, that must be, I mean, not to say that there's a right or wrong, but nice to have a period where you can enjoy having permanency.
That's true. Yeah. It's great having sort of like consistent hours. Like before, I'd have casual jobs, for example, and the hours would change according to my study needs, but it also meant the income would change.
Yes, that's right, and that can be challenging, can't it?
Yeah.
And is there anything? I know that there was the first bit. Is there anything that I can help you with? Anything you'd still like to know that could be helpful? I think you're all over. If I imagine at some point were you an international student here in Australia?
No, I'm considered domestic. I've because I'm a NZ citizen and I've done my high schooling in Australia as well.
And so, what is there anything that you? I was going to ask you, but I was going to ask you your tips on how you've got to where. Well, yeah, I'll just ask you, and then you can ask me. Then how have you done? I mean, your role is a coveted. I mean, so many people want a role in a university. What do you think's been your success in terms of? I can see some of it. Shine up your brand. What have you done well?
Well, I'd say it's like, the importance of networking I've come to realize over time. And I mean, that didn't help particularly with this role I applied for, and they were quite happy with me at the interview. And I think that's maybe because, confidence shown through, and they liked, I guess, that I was warm and genuine.
I
That's part
love
of the feedback I got. Yeah.
Yeah. And you know what? Every time I teach interview skills, and I think I talked about it a little bit at the beginning. Yes, at the beginning of this, it's that warm. Actually, I took a screenshot of it. Just one sec. Just before I came into this session, I took a screenshot of a professional in my field, and she said, discover these great interview tips from this lady. In my career coaching sessions, this is somebody else, I stress the significance of mastering the charisma zone during the interview. It's about, and so I love that. And I always find these little synchronicities that happen where we're able to help one another. And I really appreciate you being here and sharing that, because it says it's all about balancing competency and warmth. And you obviously did that beautifully. And you used that word that you were warm. What was the other word they said?
Genuine.
Genuine, yeah. And in the first hour, I spoke a lot about that. And it says, whilst some of us naturally shine in one area, it's vital not to let the other one slip. And over the last couple of years of talking about interviews, and from feedback from employers that come to the uni, they tell us that they will employ somebody who shows more genuineness and enthusiasm and that warmth for the role and who has less experience than somebody who has like an older candidate. And when I watch people's, so over the last couple of months, I've been watching people's interview videos, and the one thing that I have seen is that some of our best students do really well in getting all the competency right, but because they're focused on getting the competency right, they forget to show that warmth. So thank you so much for reminding me about that warmth. Because people work with people, and people employ people that they like.
That's true. It'd be a different story if people in the workplace did not get along.
Yes. But
Yeah,
as long as we're still people in the workplace and we're moving, that is changing rapidly. Yeah, we want to work with people that we get along well with. So
yeah. I'm sorry, but I will have to go now.
fine. We're over now. It's 2:01. Lovely to have you here, and
Thank you
so
for the presentation.
Yeah, don't forget there's an hour before that, and in the hour before that, I talk about, which might be helpful for you as you move going to networking events and things like that. Some tips around that. As you move, through your career, whether it's in research, but certainly even in universities, going to those functions. So one of the things was standing near the food. If you don't get time to go back, stand near the food station, not near the door.
That's a smart one.
It's a big one, isn't it? But at the end of the food station, not the beginning of the food station. So once you've got your food, hang around there. Everyone hangs around the door, and it's the worst place to stand. Oh, there you go.
Okay, awesome. Love the tip.
Yeah, it's
Thank you
great.
so much.
I loved it. And in fact, it was new. I heard it the other day, and I was like, oh, that is just awesome. It makes such sense, because people are anxious when they come in the door and they want to get settled. So if you get somewhere where people are settled, which is around the food and the drink and the coffee,
and when when they're filling their bellies and they're at their happiest.
That's right. Absolutely. And then they're just like they've got something in their hands. So yeah. All right, take care. Lovely to have you here.
Thanks so much, Rebecca. Have a good day. Bye.